Years later she appears, but now she carries something that didn't exist before. A millionaire businessman sees his ex-wife cleaning the floor of a luxury hotel. She wears rubber gloves, and in her arms, a sleeping child. His eyes recognize that small face. It is like looking into a mirror of the past. That night he had a $90,000 ring in his pocket, a promise for another woman, a perfect future planned. But when he saw the woman he abandoned holding his son, his entire world of glass shattered into pieces. Sometimes true luxury does not shine. It cleans floors, and even so, it holds up the sky. Give a like if this touched your soul. It is not a click. It is a hug between those who know how it hurts to lose. Comment how you think this story will end, and if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing, but for us it means the world. Thank you for being here. The Imperial Ballroom of the Palace Hotel in New York shone like a dream stage that April night. The huge Czech crystal chandeliers projected thousands of reflections on the Moet champagne glasses, on the haute couture dresses, on the Armani suits that walked with confidence between white marble columns. The air smelled of Dior perfume, discreet Cuban tobacco, and old money. Everything had been thought out to the millimeter, every detail, every guest, every photograph. Alexander Miller breathed deeply in front of the mirror in the private hallway, adjusting for the 13th time the knot of his Italian tie. 36 years old, impeccable black hair, sharp jawline, grey eyes that had learned to negotiate without blinking. His reflection gave back the image of success. CEO of the Miller Group, an empire that controlled renewable energy, investment funds and government contracts valued at billions of dollars. In the inner pocket of his jacket rested an engagement ring valued at $90,000. The diamond was so big, it was almost obscene. In 20 minutes, in front of 300 carefully selected guests, he would kneel before Victoria Montgomery, heiress of a banking dynasty, face on social magazine covers, the perfect woman according to the parameters of his mother, his board of directors, his social circle. 3 years planning that moment. A public proposal. A magazine cover the next day. A marriage that would consolidate alliances, open doors in Brussels and Washington, guarantee contracts with the Montgomerys until the 3rd generation. "Everything perfect, Mr. Miller," whispered his personal assistant Natalie, checking the schedule on her tablet. "The photographer is ready, the violinists know the signal. Miss Montgomery is in her suite finalizing details." Alexander nodded without really listening to her. His mind reviewed the speech he had memorized. Words about destiny, love, and future. Pretty words, empty words. He left the private hallway toward the main corridor of the hotel. Natalie's heels clicked behind him. The elegant murmur of the ballroom grew as they approached. Controlled laughter. Conversations about the stock market, politics, vacations in the Maldives. And then Alexander's world stopped. Through the side service corridor, almost hidden behind a column, a woman crossed hurriedly pushing a metal cleaning cart. Worn grey uniform, apron with chemical product stains, yellow latex gloves, dark brown hair tied in a tight ponytail, face without makeup, deep dark circles. And in her arms, wrapped in a frayed blanket, a small child slept with his little head resting against her shoulder. Alexander could not move. He could not breathe. Because that face was the only one he had never managed to erase, no matter how hard he tried. No matter how much tequila he drank on sleepless nights. No matter how many meetings he scheduled to not think. No matter how many women he pretended to be present with. Lucy Morales. The name went through his chest like a silent bullet. 2 years. Only 2 years had passed since he had left her with a cowardly excuse about incompatible goals and different life moments. 2 years since he had chosen family approval over the only woman who had looked at him without seeing his last name first. And now, she was there. But not like the Lucy he remembered. That student with bright eyes who worked by day as a cashier and studied accounting at night, who laughed with used books in cheap cafes, who dreamed of changing her life through knowledge. Now she wore cleaning gloves. Now she pushed a cart with dirty rags. Now she carried a child. Alexander's eyes descended instinctively toward the sleeping creature. He could not see the face well, but he could distinguish the line of the nose, the shape of the chin, the shadow of the eyelashes, even when closed. It was like seeing a miniature photograph of himself. The air in the hallway became thick. "Mr. Miller." Natalie touched him lightly on the arm. "Are you all right?" Alexander blinked. Lucy had disappeared behind the swinging doors of the service area, like a ghost, like a dream, like a sentence. Yes, I'm fine," he lied with a raspy voice. But he wasn't. He entered the ballroom with trembling legs. Victoria was waiting for him by the cocktail bar, radiant in a white Valentino dress that left one shoulder bare. Diamond bracelets, inherited emerald necklace, smile perfectly calculated for the cameras that were already positioned. "It's about time, honey," she said with a barely disguised tone of reproach. "The Suttons are asking for you." Alexander barely heard her. His eyes compulsively searched the back of the room, the service doors, any sign of movement. "Alexander, are you listening to me?" "Yes, sorry." He swallowed hard. "I'm a little tense." Victoria laughed with that rehearsed laugh she used in interviews. "It's normal, it's an important night." She slid her hand down his arm possessively. "But everything is going to be perfect, as always. As always." Those words echoed in Alexander's mind with bitterness. His whole life had been, as always. Predictable, controlled, successful on paper, empty in substance. The minutes passed in a blur. He greeted investors with automatic smiles. He heard toasts he did not register. He felt the weight of the ring in his pocket as if it were lead. And then his chief financial officer, Stephen Palmer, entered the room with a face the color of ash. "Alexander," his voice trembled. "I need to talk to you. Now." "In the middle of the party?" Stephen approached and lowered his voice to almost a hiss. "We have a catastrophic problem with the Sutton deal." Alexander felt the ground give way under his feet. Alexander led Stephen toward a discreet corner of the room, behind a burgundy velvet curtain that separated the main area from a small private lounge. Victoria looked at them from afar with a furrowed brow, but did not dare to interrupt. Business protocol still commanded respect, even on her engagement night. "Speak," Alexander ordered with a sharp voice. Stephen took out his mobile phone with trembling hands and showed a series of emails. His face had lost all color. The external audit reviewed the final documents this afternoon. They found serious inconsistencies in the tax projections of the agreement with the Sutton Group. "They are not minor errors, Alexander. They are fiscal holes that could be interpreted as deliberate evasion." Alexander felt the blood leave his brain. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means that if we sign tomorrow at 10 in the morning with these numbers, we won't just lose money. We will face IRS investigations, million-dollar sanctions, press, scandals, and the initial loss figure exceeds $200 million. But the reputational damage, that is priceless." Alexander's world wobbled. The Sutton deal was the biggest merger of the year in the energy sector. 8 months of brutal negotiations, 500 families depending on those jobs, international contracts on hold, and he had been so focused on organizing a marriage proposal worthy of Instagram that he hadn't even personally supervised the last documents. "Where is our tax team?" he asked with a clenched jaw. "In London, European Accounting Congress. They don't come back until tomorrow noon. Then bring them today, now." "I already tried. There are no flights. There is an air traffic controller strike. They are stranded." Alexander closed his eyes. He breathed deeply. Every second that passed was 1 second less to solve a disaster that could destroy decades of business building. "We need to solve this in the next few hours," Stephen continued with a broken voice. "If we don't correct the numbers before dawn, I will have to recommend cancelling the signing. And if we cancel, we lose the merger. Sutton will go with the Italians, and we will be left exposed with committed investments that we won't be able to sustain." "What about Mike? What about Sarah?" Alexander named 2 senior accountants on his team. "Mike is down with pneumonia. Sarah resigned last week. Remember? You said yes without reading her letter." Alexander clenched his fists. Yes. He remembered it vaguely. He had signed that acceptance while talking on the phone with the jeweler about the ring. Victoria suddenly appeared next to them with a champagne glass in her hand and an irritated expression. "What is going on?" she demanded to know. "You have been here for 10 minutes, people are asking. My father is waiting for your speech." "Victoria, not now. Not now." Her voice rose half a tone. "Are you going to ruin my night because of spreadsheets?" Alexander looked at her. He really looked at her, and for the first time he saw what had always been there. Victoria didn't care about him. She cared about the event, about the photo, about the show. For her, that night was a stage production. He was just one more actor in her perfect production. "This is more important than a party," Alexander replied with a coldness he didn't know he possessed. Victoria glared at him. "I can't believe you are saying that." She turned around and walked away with furious steps, her heels hitting the marble like a sentence. Stephen looked at him with concern. "What do we do, Alexander?" Before he could answer, he saw her again. Lucy emerged again from the service hallway, now without the child in her arms. She carried a cardboard box with folded tablecloths and, under her arm, a thin folder with documents. She walked with her head down, like someone who has learned to be invisible. She didn't look for eyes, she didn't expect recognition. She simply existed on the margins of the world of glass and diamonds. And Alexander made a decision that would change everything. Without saying a word to Stephen, he walked straight toward her. His $1,000 Italian shoes echoed against the floor. The guests were beginning to notice. Some turned their heads with curiosity. Others whispered, "Lucy." She stopped in her tracks. For a fleeting instant, her face trembled, a microsecond where all the memories went through her honey-colored eyes, afternoons in public libraries, kisses in nameless parks, promises that broke like cheap glass. But then everything hardened again. She raised her chin. She looked at him with a professional and distant expression that hurt more than any scream. "Mr. Miller." That formality was a stab. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Lucy looked around. Some guests were already openly watching them. A woman with a pearl necklace whispered something to her companion. A photographer raised his camera, hesitating. "I don't think it's appropriate," Lucy replied in a low voice. "Please." Something in his tone must have sounded genuinely desperate, because Lucy exhaled with tiredness and nodded briefly. She left the box on the cleaning cart and followed him toward the small private lounge where Stephen was still waiting, petrified. When they entered, Stephen looked at Lucy with evident confusion. "Alexander, what—" "Stephen, this is Lucy Morales," Alexander said with a tense voice, "and I think she can help us." Lucy frowned. "Help you with what?" Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. "We have a serious tax problem, a $200 million merger at risk. Our team is out of the country, and I remembered that you studied tax accounting." Lucy watched him with a mix of disbelief and something that looked like old pain. "You are asking for professional help. From me?" Her voice was soft but sharp. "From the cleaning woman." "From the smartest person I know," Alexander replied without thinking. Silence fell like a slab. Stephen looked between them, trying to decipher the untold story floating in the air. Lucy breathed deeply. She looked toward the door. She looked at her grey uniform. She looked at Alexander's hands, which were shaking imperceptibly. "Why should I help you?" Alexander swallowed hard. "Because 500 families will lose their jobs if this fails. Because there are people who have nothing to do with my mistakes. And because—" He made a painful pause. "Because you always did the right thing, even when I didn't." Lucy's eyes moistened for a second. Then they hardened again. "Show me the numbers." Stephen held out his tablet with trembling hands. Lucy took it naturally and began to slide her finger across the screens of complex tax documents. Her eyes moved quickly, absorbing information with a speed that left Stephen speechless. "Where can I sit?" she asked with a practical tone. Alexander pointed to a velvet chair. Lucy shook her head. "I need space. The floor is fine." And without more ceremony, she sat on the marble floor with her back against the wall, the tablet in her lap, and absolute concentration. She took a pen from the pocket of her apron and began to make notes on a paper napkin she had taken from a nearby table. Alexander and Stephen watched her in silence, hypnotized. For 35 minutes, the fate of the Miller Group rested in the hands of a woman in a grey uniform. Lucy did not ask for coffee. She did not ask for additional explanations. She simply worked with surgical precision. "Here," she said finally, pointing to a section of the document. "They are paying corporate tax twice on the same transaction. Nobody saw it because it is registered in 2 different jurisdictions with different names." Stephen approached and looked at the screen, incredulous. "My God." "She's right," Lucy continued, unfazed. "Here they ignored a double taxation treaty with Luxembourg, and here they projected profits as if the branch were exempt from state taxes, but it hasn't been since last year's reform." "How much does that change?" Alexander asked with a raspy voice. Lucy did mental calculations as if she were adding up groceries. "Approximately 47 million in this section, 82 million here. And this right here is a legal bomb that could generate government audits for 5 years. Stephen dropped into a chair, pale. How can you see all that so fast?" Lucy raised her gaze slowly. There was tiredness in her eyes, but there was also something else, unbreakable dignity. "Because I studied every night after cleaning offices for 4 years, because I graduated with honors from a night university while raising a son alone, because nobody gave me anything, so I had to be better than everyone." She paused. "And because you, the ones who have everything, sometimes forget to check the details." Alexander felt shame burning his throat. "Lucy, No," she interrupted him firmly. "Not now. Give me another 15 minutes. She went back to concentrating on the documents. Her fingers flew over the screen. From time to time she wrote something on the napkin with small, clear handwriting. Stephen approached Alexander and whispered, "Who is she really?" Alexander closed his eyes. "Someone I didn't deserve." Finally, Lucy held the tablet back to Stephen, along with the napkin full of notes. "The corrections are marked. If you implement these changes before the signing, you save the merger and avoid legal problems. The tax savings are $129 million, and the structure is shielded against any audit." Stephen looked at the napkin as if it were the Holy Grail. This is brilliant." He looked up at Lucy with genuine wonder. "Are you a certified accountant?" "I am," she replied with simplicity. "But degrees don't get you a job when you have a small child and no network of contacts. Cleaning pays better than waiting for interviews that never come." She stood up, shaking her uniform. Alexander noticed then the worn knees of the fabric, the bleach stains on the sleeves, the hands cracked from constant contact with chemicals, and he felt something inside him break definitively. "Lucy, I need to talk to you. Truly." She looked at him with an expression impossible to decipher. "About Matthew." The name fell between them like a stone in still water. Alexander felt the air leave his lungs. "Then, he is—" "Yes," Lucy interrupted him with a neutral voice. "He is your son. He is 1 year and 7 months old. And before you ask, I tried to tell you when I found out about the pregnancy. I called, I wrote, I went to your office. Your secretary told me you had left instructions not to see me, that moving on with my life was the best for both of us." Every word was a slap. "I never gave those instructions. It doesn't matter if you gave them or someone else in your name," Lucy replied with a devastating calm. "The result was the same. I was left alone, and I learned that it was okay, that I could do it alone, that I didn't need to be chosen to be enough." Alexander felt tears pressing behind his eyes, but he couldn't cry. He hadn't allowed himself to cry since he was 12 years old, and his father told him that the Millers don't show weakness. Can I meet him?" Lucy studied him in silence for several eternal seconds. "I don't know, Alexander. He is fine. He is happy. He lacks nothing that love can't give. Do you really want to enter his life, or do you just want to feel less guilty?" The question pierced Alexander like an arrow. Before he could answer, the door to the private lounge opened abruptly. Victoria entered with furious steps, followed by 2 friends who looked as upset as she was. "Can I know what is going on here?" she demanded with a high voice. "You've been missing for half an hour, Alexander. My father is about to leave. The photographers are asking." "This is ridiculous." Her gaze fell on Lucy. She looked her up and down with barely disguised contempt. "And who is this?" Lucy took a step back instinctively, lowering her head. It was a learned gesture. The gesture of someone who has been made invisible so many times that they no longer expect to be seen. And that angered Alexander more than anything else. "She is the person who just saved my company," he replied with a frozen voice. Victoria laughed with disbelief. "Her? The cleaning girl? Please, Alexander, don't be dramatic." "Her name is Lucy Morales," he said, pronouncing every syllable with sharp clarity. "She is a certified public accountant. And in 30 minutes, she did what my team of experts couldn't do in months." Victoria looked at him as if he had gone crazy. "Are you defending the service staff? In the middle of our engagement party?" Alexander felt something break inside him, a tight rope that finally gave way. He put his hand in his jacket pocket. He took out the blue velvet box, and instead of opening the box and kneeling as he had planned for 3 years, he simply held it in his hand, looking at it as if it were a strange object. "I can't do this," he said in a low voice. The private lounge froze. Victoria blinked several times as if she hadn't heard correctly. "What did you say?" Alexander looked up. His grey eyes met hers, and for the first time in 3 years, he was completely honest. "I can't ask you to marry me." Victoria's face went through several emotions in seconds. Confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally pure fury. "Is this a joke?" "No." "Are you leaving me? Now? Here?" Her voice was rising dangerously. "In front of 300 people? In front of my family?" "I'm sorry." Victoria took a step toward him with clenched fists. "You're sorry?" Her laugh was hysterical. 3 years, Alexander. 3 years of my life wasted with you for you to now tell me you're sorry. "You never loved me," he said with sudden tiredness. "And I never loved you. We were convenient for each other, nothing more." Victoria slapped him. The sound echoed in the private lounge like a shot. Alexander's cheek turned red instantly, but he did not move. He did not defend himself. He simply accepted the blow as if he deserved it. "You are a coward," Victoria hissed with tears of rage. "A damn coward who ruins everything for what? For her?" She pointed to Lucy with contempt. "For a simple housemaid." "For me," Alexander replied with a broken voice. "Because I spent 2 years building a fake life. Because I have a son I don't know. Because the most valuable woman I knew is cleaning floors while I show off diamonds. And because if I marry you, I will be unhappy every day of the rest of my life." Victoria was shaking with anger. Her friends tried to calm her, but she pushed them away with a sharp gesture. "You are going to regret this," she promised with a poisonous voice. "My family will destroy you. Your reputation will be in ruins. Everyone will know that Alexander Miller is a failure." "So be it," he replied with an unexpected calm. Victoria looked at him one last time with pure hate, then left the private lounge, slamming the door so hard it made the walls shake. Her friends followed her, throwing murderous looks at Alexander. The silence that remained was dense and heavy. Stephen looked at his boss with eyes as wide as plates, not knowing what to say. Lucy remained against the wall, completely still, as if she wanted to melt into the marble and disappear. Alexander put the ring box back in his pocket. Then he turned toward Lucy. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I failed you in the worst way possible. But please, let me meet my son." Lucy looked at him for long seconds. Her honey-colored eyes shone with unshed tears. "He is in the hotel employees' room, with Martha, the cleaning supervisor. She watches him when I work. Can I see him now?" Lucy nodded slowly. "But I warn you something, Alexander. If you enter his life, you can't leave when it's convenient for you. You can't show up and disappear according to your corporate schedules. Either you are completely present, or it's better that you aren't at all." "I will be present," he promised with a trembling voice. "I swear." Lucy studied his face, looking for lies. Finally, she exhaled with tiredness. "Follow me." They left the private lounge. The main ballroom was now in controlled chaos. Victoria was sobbing dramatically, surrounded by her family. The guests whispered, scandalized. The photographers took pictures frantically. Natalie, Alexander's assistant, ran from one side to another, trying to control the public relations disaster unfolding in real time. But Alexander did not look back. He followed Lucy through the service corridor, going down narrow cement stairs that smelled of disinfectant. They went through hallways with bare walls and flickering fluorescent lights. The bright and golden world of the Palace Hotel was left behind like a mirage. Finally, they reached a metal door with a sign that said, "Authorized personnel only." Lucy opened it. Inside was a small room with folding chairs, a plastic table, an old microwave, and a worn sofa. On the sofa, an older woman in a uniform identical to Lucy's gently rocked a small child. The child was awake now. Big, dark eyes, messy brown hair, a smile with few teeth that lit up his face when he saw Lucy. "Mama?" Lucy smiled for the first time that night, a genuine smile that completely transformed her face. "Hello, my love." She took the child in her arms. He hugged her neck with that absolute trust that only small children have. Alexander could not move. He could not breathe. He could not think, because the child was identical to him. It was like seeing photographs of his own childhood coming to life. Every feature, every gesture, every blink. "Matthew," Lucy said softly. "This man," she swallowed. "This man is your daddy." The child looked at Alexander with childish curiosity. "Daddy?" Alexander felt the whole world compress in that moment. He fell to his knees in front of the child, with tears rolling freely down his face. All those decades of the Millers don't cry evaporated. "Yes," he whispered with a broken voice. "I'm your daddy. And I'm so sorry I took so long to meet you." Matthew held out a small hand and touched Alexander's wet cheek with wonder. "Why are you crying?" "Because I'm happy," Alexander replied, surprised by the truth of those words. "Very, very happy." And for the first time in years, Alexander Miller felt that he was truly alive. Dawn arrived without Alexander having slept. He had spent the night in his apartment in downtown Manhattan, sitting in front of a window, watching the city wake up. His mobile phone had exploded with calls and messages. His mother, his board of directors, journalists, the Montgomery family threatening with lawsuits, Victoria sending increasingly furious messages. He had ignored everything. In his mind there was only room for one image, Matthew touching his face with that small hand, asking him why he was crying. At 7 in the morning, he showered, put on a dark grey suit, and drove toward the Miller Group. He needed to sign the Sutton agreement with Lucy's corrections. Stephen was waiting for him in the boardroom, with deep dark circles and 3 espressos consumed. On the mahogany table rested the modified documents according to Lucy's notes. "The lawyers reviewed everything during the night," Stephen informed with a raspy voice. "The corrections are impeccable. Sutton already gave the green light. We sign in an hour." Alexander nodded, looking at the papers that had been about to destroy his company. "Stephen, I need the contact for the HR director. Now." Now. 20 minutes later, Alexander was dictating a job offer letter. Lucy Morales, senior tax analyst, $80,000 annual salary, full health insurance, corporate daycare for Matthew, indefinite contract. "Are you sure?" Stephen asked. "After last night's scandal, hiring her could generate rumors." "I don't care about the rumors," Alexander cut in. "I care about having competent people, and she saved this company. She deserves recognition, not gossip." The signing with Sutton happened without setbacks, handshakes, protocol photographs, champagne that Alexander did not taste. His mind was somewhere else. At noon, he drove back to the Palace Hotel. He asked for Lucy in Human Resources. They told him her shift began at 3 in the afternoon. He waited. At 3:15, he saw her enter through the employee's door with her grey uniform and the same tired expression as always. When she saw him waiting for her in the hallway, she stopped abruptly. "What are you doing here?" Alexander held out a manila envelope to her. "It's a job offer at my company. I want you to read it before you reject it." Lucy took the envelope with suspicion. She opened it. She read in silence. Her eyes widened with every line. This is too much. It is what is fair. I don't need your charity, Alexander. It is not charity, he replied firmly. It is professional recognition. Yesterday, you saved a $200 million merger. Today I need people like you on my team. Not because of what we were, because of what you are capable of doing. Lucy closed the envelope. She looked at him with those eyes that knew how to see beyond words. And Matthew? Does this include Matthew? Or does it just buy your peace of conscience? It includes everything, Alexander said with a trembling voice. I want to be his father, truly. Not an occasional visitor. I want to be present. Take him to the park. Read him stories. Teach him to ride a bike. Everything I didn't know I needed until I saw him last night. Lucy remained silent for several seconds that felt like forever. I need time to think about it. Take all the time you need, Alexander replied. But please, don't disappear. Not again. Lucy nodded slowly and went through the service corridor, carrying with her the offer that could change her life. 3 days later, Lucy called the number Alexander had left in the letter. Her voice sounded cautious but firm. I accept the offer, but with conditions. Whatever you need. First, this is strictly professional. I don't mix my work with my personal life. If I fail, you fire me without guilt. If I excel, you recognize me without favoritism. Done. Second, Matthew is non-negotiable. You can't enter and leave his life according to your schedule. If you start, you finish. Understood? Understood. Third, I need you to sign joint custody documents with family lawyer supervision. I want everything legal and clear. Alexander felt a knot in his throat, but he nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I will do it, whenever you want. There was a pause. I start on Monday. And Alexander, thank you for the opportunity. Not for us. For my son. He is our son, he said softly. Not yet, he isn't, Lucy replied with painful honesty. But maybe he can be, with time. On Monday morning, Lucy entered the Miller Group corporate building dressed in a discreet navy blue pantsuit and a white blouse. She wore her hair down for the first time, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Without the grey uniform, without the dark circles of exhaustion, she looked like another person. Or rather, she finally looked like herself. The receptionist gave her her access pass. Stephen received her personally and guided her toward her office. A bright space with windows overlooking the city, a high-end computer, and an empty desk waiting to be filled with her work. Welcome to the team, Stephen said with a genuine smile. Yesterday I reviewed your academic record. Graduated with honors. 2 publications in tax journals. Why the hell were you cleaning floors? Lucy smiled sadly. Because no company hires single mothers without corporate experience or contacts. Doors close when you don't have last names that open windows. Stephen nodded with uncomfortable understanding. Well, here that door is open. And we need you. We have a mess with tax deductions in the renewable energy sector. Are you interested? I'm interested in everything that teaches me, Lucy replied with determination. The first days were complicated. Some employees looked at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. Rumors were running about the mysterious woman who ruined the CEO's engagement. But Lucy kept her head high and worked with a dedication that silenced critics. By the second week, she had already solved 3 tax problems that the department had been dragging for months. By the third week, Stephen invited her to present her findings to the board of directors. Alexander attended that meeting. He sat at the back of the boardroom, watching Lucy explain with crystal clarity the necessary reforms in their tax structure. She didn't look at him. She didn't look for his approval. She simply did her work brilliantly. When she finished, the financial director applauded. Miss Morales, this is exactly what we needed. We will implement your recommendations immediately. Lucy nodded with quiet professionalism, but Alexander saw the discreet shine in her eyes, the pride of someone who is finally recognized for what they are worth. After the meeting, Alexander intercepted her in the hallway. You were incredible in there. Thank you, she replied formally. It's my job. Lucy, can we talk about Matthew? 2 weeks have passed. I have respected your space, but I would really like... Lucy interrupted him with a sigh. Saturday. You can come to Central Park at 11 in the morning. We will spend time together, the three of us. But as acquaintances, Alexander, not as a family, not yet. I understand, he said, feeling a mix of hope and fear. I'll be there. Saturday dawned with a clear sky. Alexander arrived at the park 15 minutes early, nervous as a teenager on a first date. He wore jeans, something he hadn't used since college, sneakers and a simple t-shirt. No Swiss watches or Italian jackets, just him. Lucy appeared pushing a stroller where Matthew sat with a superhero hat and a huge smile. When he saw Alexander, the child pointed with excitement. The man who cries. Alexander laughed, surprised. Hello, champ. They walked through the tree-lined paths. Matthew ran ahead chasing pigeons. Lucy and Alexander kept a prudent distance like two strangers learning to live together. Tell me about him, Alexander asked. Everything I missed. Lucy breathed deeply. He was born on February 3rd. He weighed 7 pounds. He cried so hard the nurses thought something was wrong, but he just had character. She smiled with tenderness. He likes dinosaurs. He hates green vegetables but loves carrots. He sleeps hugging a lion plushie that Martha, the hotel supervisor, gave him. Alexander listened absorbed, memorizing every detail as if they were sacred secrets. And you? He asked carefully. How was all of this alone? Lucy looked toward Matthew, who was now trying to climb a low tree. Hard. There were nights where I didn't know if I could pay the rent and the daycare at the same time. Days where I studied with Matthew asleep on my legs because I had no one to leave him with. Moments where I thought I wasn't going to make it. She paused. But I made it, and it made me stronger. You shouldn't have had to do it alone, Alexander said with a broken voice. No, Lucy agreed. But I did. And now I am the person I am because of that. Matthew ran toward them shouting, Daddy, look, with a leaf in his hand. Alexander bent down to receive it as if it were a treasure. The child threw himself into his arms with that natural trust of childhood. And something inside Alexander healed. The following weeks established a routine. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, Alexander picked Matthew up from corporate daycare. Every other weekend, they spent time together, the three of them. Alexander learned to change diapers, to read stories with funny voices, to prepare sandwiches without crusts, because Matthew hated them. Lucy watched with caution, looking for signs that Alexander would get tired, that he would find excuses, that he would disappear like the first time. But Alexander did not disappear. He cancelled business trips to not miss birthdays. He rejected important dinners for little league games. He turned his minimalist apartment into a space with toys, children's books, and dinosaur drawings stuck on the fridge. His mother called him scandalized. Is it true that you have a son with a servant? Yes, Alexander replied without shame. And it's the best thing that has happened to me. The Montgomerys have closed doors to us. Victoria is spreading horrible rumors. Your reputation is damaged. Then it wasn't that solid to begin with, he replied calmly. I prefer to lose contracts than to lose my son. He hung up without waiting for an answer. The scandal exploded in social magazines a month later. The CEO who traded diamonds for diapers, Alexander Miller, abandons his engagement for secret romance. The photographs were inevitable. Alexander pushing a cart in the supermarket, Lucy leaving work with Matthew, the three of them walking in the park. The headlines were cruel but predictable. Lucy arrived one morning at the office with a tense face. Several colleagues looked away. Someone had left a magazine on her desk with her photo on the cover. The Cinderella who conquered the corporate prince. Stephen entered her office with a concerned expression. Lucy, the communications department wants to make an official statement. Control the damage. Is that okay with you? What are they going to say? She asked with tiredness. The truth, that you are an excellent professional hired on your own merit. That your private life is nobody's business. Lucy shook her head. I don't want to be news. I just want to work in peace. But peace was a luxury the press did not grant. Paparazzi waited outside the building. Social networks debated if Lucy was a gold digger or a victim. The comments were merciless. Alexander called a press conference without consulting anyone. Lucy found out watching the news from the office break room. There he was, in front of dozens of cameras and hungry journalists, in an impeccable suit, but with a tired face. "I am not going to talk about my private life in detail," he began with a firm voice, "but I am going to clarify something. Lucy Morales is a brilliant accountant who was hired for professional ability, not for personal links. She saved a critical merger when nobody else could. She deserves respect, not gossip." A journalist shouted from the back, "Is it true that she is the mother of your son?" Alexander looked at him directly. "Yes, and he is the best gift life has given me. My son and his mother deserve privacy. If you want to judge me for choosing to be a responsible father instead of keeping a fake image, go ahead. But leave my family in peace." The room exploded in simultaneous questions. Alexander stood up and left without answering more. That night Lucy called him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied. "I am not going to let them destroy you because of my past mistakes." "Alexander, this is complicated. People talk. My colleagues look at me differently. Matthew will eventually hear things at school. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm not going to hide, nor hide you. You are important to me. Both of you are." Lucy remained silent. Then, with a soft voice, "You know, for a long time I hated you. Then I stopped hating you and simply moved on. But now, seeing how you try, I don't know what to feel." "You don't have to feel anything yet," Alexander said. "Just let me keep trying." The months passed. The media storm eventually calmed when the next scandal appeared. Lucy became an integral part of the tax team, respected by her colleagues. Alexander learned to be a father, making mistakes and correcting them. One October afternoon, Matthew got sick with a high fever. Lucy took him to the pediatric hospital, pale with worry. She called Alexander from the emergency room. "It's just a viral infection," she informed him with a trembling voice. "But he had 104 fever and I'm on my way," Alexander interrupted, already grabbing his jacket. "You have the meeting with the German investors." "I don't give a damn about the meeting. I'm going." He arrived 30 minutes later, messy and without a tie. He found Lucy in the waiting room with red eyes. Without thinking, he hugged her. She let him, for the first time allowing herself to break down a little. "I was so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I know. Me too. But it's okay. He's going to be okay." When they could go in to see Matthew, the boy was asleep with an IV. He looked so small in that hospital bed. Alexander felt a primitive terror he had never known. "Now I understand," he said in a low voice. "Why you never slept well when he was a baby. This constant fear that something bad might happen." Lucy nodded. "Welcome to real parenthood. It's not just parks and dinosaurs. It's worry that never ends." They spent the night in the hospital. Alexander slept in an uncomfortable chair next to the bed. Lucy reclined on the other side. When Matthew woke up at 6 in the morning asking for water, he saw both his parents there and smiled. Daddy and Mommy together. Something changed that night. An invisible barrier dissolved. 2 weeks later, Lucy invited Alexander to dinner at her apartment. It was small but cozy. Walls with Matthew's drawings, piled books, the smell of homemade food. Everything opposite to Alexander's minimalist apartment. "I made lasagna," she said, a bit nervous. "I don't know if you like it." "I love it," he replied, although he had no idea if he liked it or not. He hadn't eaten homemade food in years. Matthew entertained them during dinner with incomprehensible stories about daycare. After putting him to bed, Alexander and Lucy sat on the sofa with chamomile tea. "I want to tell you something," Alexander began. "These months with you and Matthew have been the most real of my life. I never knew I could feel like this, complete, as if all the pieces finally fit." Lucy looked at him with caution. "Alexander, No, let me finish. He breathed deeply. I'm not asking for us to go back to being what we were. We were young and I was an idiot, but I'm asking for the chance to build something new, something better, as parents, as friends, and maybe, someday, as something more. Lucy remained silent for several seconds. You scared me a lot, she admitted finally, because I'm starting to believe you, and I'm terrified of being wrong again. I'm not going to leave, Alexander promised, even if you ask me to. Matthew is my life now, and you are the bravest and most extraordinary person I know. I'm not extraordinary, she murmured. I'm just a woman who did what she had to do. Exactly, he replied, and that makes you extraordinary. Lucy smiled for the first time that night, a small but genuine smile. We can try, she said with caution, but slowly, very slowly. All the time in the world, Alexander promised. Not everything was simple. The ghost of Victoria Montgomery reappeared in an unexpected way. Her family, powerful and influential, began to withdraw investments from the Miller Group. Traditional clients cancelled contracts. Rumors about instability in management circulated in business boards. One morning, the board of directors summoned Alexander for an emergency meeting. His own uncle, vice president of the group, led the attack. Alexander, your personal decisions are affecting the company. Shares have dropped 12%. We have lost 3 important contracts. How long are we going to pay for your situation? Alexander stood firm. My situation is my life, and the company is solid thanks to the work of competent people, including Lucy Morales. That woman is the problem, his uncle exploded. Her presence here generates controversy. It would be better for everyone if you finish that sentence, I resign, Alexander interrupted with a frozen voice. And I take the best talents with me. Silence fell like lead. Stephen, sitting at the back, cleared his throat. With all due respect, gentlemen, Lucy has generated tax savings of over $100 million this semester. Her department is the most efficient we have had. The numbers don't lie. Another board member nodded. Stephen is right, and frankly, the Montgomerys are throwing tantrums, not making business decisions. We will survive without them. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but Alexander knew the battle was not over. That night he told Lucy everything while they had dinner at a discreet restaurant. Maybe you should consider, she said carefully, hiring someone more experienced for my position, someone without complications. You are the most experienced, he replied firmly, and I'm not going to let you go because cowardly people can't see your value. But if the company suffers because of me, the company suffers because of the stupidity of others, not because of your existence. Alexander took her hand on the table. Lucy, I spent decades building an empire without a soul. Now I am building a life with purpose. I am not going to back down. Lucy squeezed his hand. Then we face it together. The crisis reached its peak when a government audit, clearly influenced by the Montgomerys, exhaustively reviewed all the Miller Group accounts. They were looking for any irregularity to sink Alexander. For 3 infernal weeks, external auditors dissected every transaction of the last 5 years. Lucy worked 16 hours a day, organizing documents, explaining procedures, showing that everything was in perfect legal order. Alexander saw her consuming herself with exhaustion. Rest, he pleaded. I can handle it. No, she replied with determination. I do this right or I don't do it, and I'm going to do it right. Finally, the day of the final presentation arrived. In a room at the Department of the Treasury, in front of serious officials and lawyers from both sides, Lucy presented a 200-page report that showed not only that the Miller Group complied with all regulations, but that its tax practices were a model of transparency. The head auditor looked at her with barely disguised respect. Miss Morales, in 20 years of career, I have rarely seen such an impeccable tax department. My congratulations. The Montgomerys' lawyers withdrew defeated. That night, the whole team celebrated in the office. Stephen raised his champagne glass. To Lucy Morales, who saved this company twice, once from stupidity and the second time from revenge. Everyone applauded. Lucy, usually reserved, let the tears run freely. "Thank you," she said with a trembling voice. "Thank you for believing in me when nobody else did." Alexander hugged her in front of everyone, not caring about the rumors or appearances. "No. Thank you for saving us from ourselves." With the audit passed, the company stabilized. Even some clients who had fled returned discreetly. Shares recovered. The Miller name was associated with solidity again, not scandal. But something more important was happening in the personal sphere. One October afternoon, Matthew was drawing in the living room, while Alexander and Lucy reviewed work documents at the dining table of her apartment. The child approached with a paper in his hands. "Look," he said, proud. It was a typical 2.5-year-old drawing, deformed figures with stick-like limbs, but it clearly showed 3 people, a big one, a medium one, and a small one, all holding hands. "It's us," Matthew explained. "My family." Alexander and Lucy looked at each other. Something passed between them, a silent understanding, a recognition that they had become, without fully planning it, exactly that, a family. "It's beautiful, champ," Alexander said with a raspy voice. For Christmas, Alexander invited Lucy and Matthew to spend the holidays in a cabin in the mountains. No employees, no excessive luxuries, just the 3 of them, snow and a fireplace. One night, after putting Matthew to bed, they sat in front of the fire with hot chocolate. "Do you know what is the strangest thing about all this?" Lucy asked. "That I'm happy, truly happy. And I was so scared of allowing myself to be." "Why?" "Because every time I was happy before, the world took it away from me. My father died when I was 10. My mother got sick when I was trying to study. And you left when I was starting to believe someone could love me." Alexander felt the weight of those words. "Lucy, what I did was unforgivable, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for it. But I want you to know something. I am not going to leave. No matter what happens, I am here to stay, because you 2 are my home." Lucy looked at him with bright eyes. "I'm scared too," Alexander admitted. "Scared of not being enough, of failing you again, of Matthew growing up and asking me why I wasn't there for the first years. But fear no longer paralyzes me. It drives me to be better." Lucy put her hand on his. "I don't need you to be perfect, Alexander. I just need you to be honest, to be present, to choose to stay even when it's hard." "I can promise you that," he whispered. They leaned toward each other. The kiss was soft, cautious, like 2 people learning to trust again. When they separated, Lucy was smiling with tears on her cheeks. "Slowly," she reminded. "Slowly," he agreed. But together. Spring brought unexpected changes. A prestigious business magazine published an extensive article about the new faces of corporate leadership. Lucy appeared on the cover along with 5 other young executives who were transforming their industries. The article highlighted her story, a single mother who studied while working, overcame economic barriers, and now led one of the most efficient tax departments in the country. The interview was honest but inspiring, without unnecessary drama. "I don't look to be an example for anything," Lucy said in the interview. "I just did what millions of women do every day: work hard, love my son, and not give up. The difference is that I had an opportunity. Many others never have it." The publication generated waves of responses. Universities invited her to give lectures. Companies asked about her methods. Young mothers wrote her messages of thanks. In a lecture at a local university, in front of hundreds of students, Lucy shared her story without embellishments. "There were nights where I ate dry cereal because I used the food money to pay for textbooks. Mornings where I took my sick son to class because I had no one to leave him with. Moments where I thought it would be easier to give up." She paused. "But every time I wanted to give up, I looked at Matthew and remembered that he deserved to see his mother fight, because someday he will also have to fight. And I want him to know it's possible." The auditorium exploded in applause. In the audience was Alexander, sitting discreetly in the last row. He had arrived without announcing himself, just to see her shine. When their eyes met, she smiled at him with a warmth that melted his heart. After the lecture, while they walked through the campus, Alexander took her hand. "I'm so proud of you. I didn't do anything extraordinary. You did everything extraordinary, and the world is finally seeing it." That night, back in Lucy's apartment, Matthew played with his dinosaurs while they prepared dinner together. It was a simple domestic scene, routine, perfect in its everydayness. "I've been thinking," Alexander said while cutting vegetables with evident clumsiness, "about something important." "What thing?" He left the knife and turned toward her. "I want us to live together, the three of us. Not as a convenience, not because it is expected, but because every night I spend without you feels incomplete." Lucy looked at him for a long time. "Are you sure? It is a big step." "I have never been surer of anything." Alexander knelt, not in a marriage proposal posture, but as a genuine plea. "I know we started everything wrong, that I failed you when you needed me most, but we have built something real these months, and I want to wake up every day knowing you are there, not in another apartment, here with me." Matthew left his toys and ran toward them. "Is Daddy going to live with us?" Lucy looked at her son, then at Alexander, and she nodded with happy tears. "Yes, my love, Daddy is going to live with us." Matthew shouted with joy and threw himself over both of them, creating a clumsy and beautiful hug of three. 6 months later, the house they bought together on the outskirts of the city was full of life. It was not an ostentatious mansion like those Alexander had considered in his previous life. It was a reasonable-sized home with 2 floors, a light stone facade and reddish tiles. It had a generous garden where Matthew could run chasing butterflies, a swing that Alexander had installed with his own hands after 3 failed attempts, and wide windows that let in the golden light of the afternoons. The walls were no longer white and empty, like in the minimalist apartment from before. Now they were full of life. Framed photographs of birthdays with uneven cakes, trips to the zoo where Matthew posed with plush giraffes, afternoons of homemade pizza with flour on their noses, and children's drawings stuck with magnets on the fridge. The kitchen smelled permanently of freshly made coffee and toasted bread. The sofa in the living room had orange juice stains that Lucy had tried to clean 3 times without success. Dinosaur toys invaded every corner. It was chaotic, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. Alexander had learned that true wealth was not measured in offshore bank accounts or stock shares. It was measured in laughter during Sunday breakfast, in spontaneous hugs before sleeping, in sleepless nights when Matthew had nightmares, and the 3 of them ended up snuggled in the big bed watching animated movies at 3 in the morning. Lucy had learned that allowing herself to be loved was not weakness, but bravery. That receiving help did not make her less independent. That building a shared life did not mean losing her identity, but expanding it. One September afternoon, with the smell of autumn approaching, Alexander arrived early from work and found Lucy in the small study they had set up on the 2nd floor. She was sitting in front of the laptop with a concentrated expression, reviewing documents. On the desk, there were 3 folders with logos of important companies. "Job offers?" Alexander asked from the door, trying to sound casual, although he felt a pang in his chest. Lucy looked up and nodded. 3 proposals for tax management. One in another city, another out of state, and this one, she pointed to the blue folder, is from a multinational here in the city. The salary is considerable. Alexander entered and sat on the edge of the desk. "Which one attracts you most?" "I don't know," she replied with honesty, leaning back in the chair. "They are incredible opportunities. 2 years ago I would have sold my soul for something like this, but now—" "Now?" Lucy closed the laptop and looked at him directly. "Now, I have to think about more things. About Matthew and his school. About this house we just turned into a home. About the team I have built at Miller, where I finally feel I belong. And about you, although I know you would say your opinion shouldn't influence me." "My opinion is that you deserve the world," Alexander said firmly. "And if any of these offers gives it to you, you should take it. It's no longer about me or my company. It's about what you need to feel fulfilled." Lucy smiled with tenderness. "You know what I discovered? For years my dream was to be professionally recognized. I imagined that recognition would fill all the voids I carried, that it would compensate for the nights of loneliness, the closed doors, the infinite tiredness. And now that I finally have that recognition, she paused, looking for the right words, I realize that what really makes me happy is this. She pointed around, the modest study with shelves full of accounting books and novels mixed, the window from where you could see the garden where Matthew played with the dog they had adopted a month ago, the photographs on the wall. This imperfect and complicated and wonderful life, waking up and not feeling that constant weight of survival. Knowing Matthew is safe, happy, loved by both parents, having a partner who washes the dishes without me asking, and who tries to cook even if he burns the rice. She laughed softly. It sounds so simple, right? But for me it's everything I never thought possible. Alexander hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her head. I spent 36 years chasing a definition of success that others taught me. I built an empire while my personal life was a barren desert. I accumulated zeros in bank accounts while I lost sight of what really mattered. I needed to lose you, recover you, and almost lose you again to understand something fundamental. The most valuable things in life do not have a market price. Very poetic for a CEO, Lucy joked, turning in the chair to look at him. I learned from the best, he replied, kissing her forehead with tenderness. They stayed like that for a few moments, in a comfortable silence, listening to Matthew's happy screams chasing the dog in the garden. I think I'm going to reject the 3 offers, Lucy said finally, or at least I'm going to take time to decide. For the first time in my life, I can choose without desperation, and that is a privilege I don't want to waste making hurried decisions. Whatever you decide, I'll be with you, Alexander promised. That night, they organized a dinner at their house. They had invited the people they considered their real family. Stephen and his wife with their 2 children, Martha, the hotel supervisor who had been like a grandmother to Matthew during the hardest days, some colleagues from the tax department who had become genuine friends, and Alexander's mother. Mrs. Miller had taken months to process everything. The scandalous breakup with the Montgomerys, the secret son, the cancelled wedding. Her aristocratic pride had suffered deep wounds. But something had changed when she met Matthew for the first time. The boy had looked at her with those eyes identical to Alexander's when he was small and had said with natural childishness, "Hello, Grandma. Do you want to see my dinosaurs?" In that moment, Mrs. Miller's heart of steel had melted like butter in the sun. Now, sitting at the dining table that Lucy had decorated with elegant simplicity, Mrs. Miller watched her son interact with his family. She saw him laugh without guards, hug without calculation, be vulnerable without shame, and she understood that although it was not the life she had planned for him, it was clearly the life that made him happy. During dinner, while they shared homemade food that Lucy and Alexander had prepared together, with mixed but edible results, Stephen stood up with his wineglass. "I need to make a toast," he announced, with that smile that everyone already knew, to Alexander, who had something many executives never find, the courage to choose authenticity over appearances, to admit he was wrong and work every day to be better. To Lucy, who taught us that true leadership does not need fancy last names or expensive business schools. It just needs integrity, intelligence, and determination. And to Matthew, he looked at the boy eating with enthusiasm, who reminds us every day that love is simpler than we adults insist on complicating. To the family, Matthew shouted, raising his juice glass. Everyone toasted among laughter and tears. Martha hugged Lucy with maternal pride. Mrs. Miller kissed her grandson's head with a tenderness she had kept hidden for decades. Stephen's children played with Matthew in the living room, their screams of joy filling the house with life. Later, when the guests left carrying containers with leftovers and promises to meet soon, when Matthew finally fell asleep after 3 stories and 4 glasses of water, Alexander and Lucy sat on the porch of their house under the starry sky. The night air was fresh. The crickets sang in the garden. The city lights shone in the distance, but there, in their little refuge, everything seemed calm and perfect. "Do you have any idea," Lucy asked, leaning against Alexander's shoulder, "how absolutely surreal all this is? Just 2 years ago, I was cleaning floors in that hotel, counting coins to decide whether to buy milk or diapers. I went to bed exhausted every night, wondering if one day things would get better. And now, she made a gesture covering everything. The cozy house, the garden her son loved, the future that no longer seemed terrifying but promising. Now I live in a beautiful house with a garden Matthew loves. I have a career they respect. And I am with the man who once broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. She looked at him with a mix of wonder and happiness. It's like living in an alternate reality. Do you regret it? Alexander asked, with that vulnerability he had learned to show. Giving me another chance. Lucy kept silent for a few seconds, considering the question with the honesty that characterized their relationship now. No, she replied finally. And I'll tell you why, because I didn't give a second chance to the same man. That Alexander who left me no longer exists. You turned into someone completely different, someone better, someone who chose to grow instead of hiding. And I changed too. I am no longer that insecure girl who needed someone to save her. I am the woman who saved herself, who built her own strength, and then chose to share her life with someone who values her exactly as she is. I love you, Alexander said with absolute simplicity, without conditions, without hidden agendas, without measuring what I can gain, just pure and simple love. I love you too, Lucy replied, and for a long time that terrified me. I was panicked about being vulnerable again, about depending emotionally on someone who could leave. But I learned that loving is not surrendering or losing independence. It is choosing every day to build something beautiful with another equally imperfect person. They kissed under the starry sky, two people who had found beauty in their shared imperfection. It was not the kiss of a romantic movie with orchestrated music. It was better. It was real. The following weeks brought more changes. Lucy decided to stay at the Miller Group, but negotiated a position as tax director, with autonomy to implement her own methodologies. Alexander, for his part, began to delegate more responsibilities, choosing to be present in the important moments. Matthew's school play, family dinners, weekends without a laptop or emergency calls. One Saturday in October, while they were buying pumpkins at a local farmer's market, Alexander stopped in the middle of the crowd. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Lucy, who was examining a particularly large pumpkin, almost dropped it. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated with a nervous smile. "I know I don't have a ring. I know we are in the middle of a vegetable market. I know there are probably 50 more romantic ways to do this. But I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment, because we are together." Matthew, who was listening fascinated, started jumping. "Say yes, Mommy. Say yes." Lucy laughed with tears falling down her cheeks. She looked around. Families buying pumpkins, the autumn sun, her excited son, the man she had learned to love again. "Yes," she said simply. 1,000 times yes. Alexander lifted her in his arms and spun, while Matthew clapped and the market vendors whistled and congratulated. It was not the proposal Alexander had planned 3 years ago in that golden ballroom. It was infinitely better. The wedding was held 2 months later in an intimate ceremony in the garden of their house. There were only 50 guests carefully chosen, family, true friends, people who had supported them in the darkest moments. Lucy wore a simple ivory dress she had found at a local boutique, without exaggerated lace or an endless train. She wore a crown of wildflowers in her hair. She was radiant with a beauty that came from within. Alexander wore a charcoal grey suit without ostentation. Matthew, dressed in an identical miniature suit, carried a cushion with the rings, simple white gold bands, without huge diamonds or pretensions. There were no social magazine photographers lurking, just a friend of Lucy's with a good camera, capturing genuine moments. Matthew taking off his shoes in the middle of the ceremony, Martha crying in the first row, Alexander's mother smiling with silent approval. When the moment for vows arrived, the garden fell into an expectant silence. Alexander took Lucy's hands between his and spoke with a trembling but firm voice. "Lucy, I promise to always see you. Not just look at you, but truly see you. See your value when the world is blind. See your tiredness when you pretend strength. See your greatness in the ordinary days that others would consider insignificant. I promise you will never be invisible to me again. I promise to be the father Matthew deserves. I promise to fail sometimes, but always to get up. And I promise that every day for the rest of my life I will choose to be worthy of your love." Lucy cried openly, not worrying about ruining the minimal makeup she wore. When she recovered her composure, she recited her own vows. "Alexander, I promise not to let the fear of the past eclipse the happiness of the present. I promise to choose you every day, especially on the difficult days when it would be easier to close myself off. I promise to teach our son that people can grow, change, and redeem themselves, that mistakes do not define who we are, but how we face them. And I promise to always remind you that true success is not measured in luxuries or titles, but in love, integrity, and shared moments." When the officiant pronounced the words, "You may kiss," Alexander took Lucy's face between his hands with such tenderness that several guests sobbed. The kiss was long, sweet, promising. Matthew broke the moment, shouting, "Now we are a real family," and throwing himself to hug both their legs. Everyone laughed while the three of them fused in a collective hug. The reception was modest but joyful. Homemade food prepared by a local chef who was a friend of Martha. Simple but delicious local wine, music from a guitarist playing soft melodies, no crystal chandeliers, no $1,000 champagne, no empty ostentation, and it was perfect. While they danced their first song as husband and wife under the colored lights they had hung in the trees in the garden, Lucy whispered against Alexander's chest, "You know what? I no longer care what the magazines or the people on social networks say. We found our way, and it's more than I ever dreamed of having." Alexander hugged her tighter, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the beat of her heart against his. "It is more than enough. It is absolutely everything." And in due moment, under the stars that shone over their little garden while their son slept upstairs and their friends celebrated around, Alexander Miller understood the lesson he had taken 37 years to learn. True shine does not come from the diamonds you buy or the golden ballrooms where you exhibit yourself. It comes from the people you choose to love, from the life you build with authenticity, humility, and an open heart. From the ordinary moments that become extraordinary, because you share them with the one you love. Months turned into years. Matthew grew healthy and happy, surrounded by the love of both parents. Lucy eventually accepted a position as an independent consultant, working for several companies from her own study, balancing career and family the way she chose. Alexander transformed his business focus, implementing support policies for working mothers, corporate daycares, flexible hours. The Miller Group became a model for corporate social responsibility, winning awards not for profits, but for human impact. When Matthew turned 6 and asked, "How did you and Daddy meet?" Lucy told him a simplified but honest version of the story. She told him that sometimes people get lost before truly finding each other, that mistakes can become lessons, that true love is not perfect, but it is real. And she told him something Matthew would remember all his life. "Your daddy taught me that people can change if they really want to, and I taught him that a person's value is not in what they possess, but in what they give." Years later, when Alexander had grey hair at his temples and Lucy had laugh lines around her eyes when Matthew was a tall teenager who surpassed them in height, they sat on that same porch where so many important conversations had happened. "Do you regret anything?" Lucy asked one night with that honesty she had never lost. Alexander thought about it carefully. "I regret having left you the first time, of not being there when Matthew was born, of those 2 lost years. But I don't regret the path that brought us here, because that pain made us who we are now." "I don't regret it either," Lucy admitted. "Everything, even the painful stuff, had to happen to get to this. And this was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Because in the end, after all the lessons learned and the battles overcome, Alexander and Lucy understood the most fundamental truth. True luxury is not living in golden palaces or flaunting riches. It is waking up every day next to people who love you not for what you have, but for who you chose to be. It is building a life where honesty is worth more than appearance. It is knowing that, although not everything is perfect, everything is genuine. And sometimes, the people who seem invisible to the world, the ones who clean floors, the ones who work in silence, the ones who fight without recognition, are precisely the ones who hold up the sky with their calloused hands and their unbreakable heart. Lucy Morales didn't just clean floors, she cleaned the life of a man who had forgotten how to live. And in doing so, she taught him that true shine is not bought. It is built, it is earned, and it is protected with every right decision, every present moment, every brave choice. Because in the end, that is what really counts. Not the diamonds on your fingers, but the hands you hold. Not the last name you carry, but the name you honor with your actions. Not the palace where you live, but the home you build with love.